Chapter 13. Ironstripe's Betrayal. Ribe was talking with a short, stubby Nextari that seemed to be some sort of scientist when she heard the loud clanking of footsteps. The Nextari scientist was in a long, thin coat that almost covered its tentacles, and it backed away when the footsteps became loud and close. Ribe, who was sitting on her throne, looked up and saw Lockjaw walk in the doorway. He had scratches in his paint, and G dripping from his metal lip. He walked forward, revealing a broken wing and G glowing on his double-bladed spear. He stopped and spoke with his head down. The job is done. He kneeled in front of Ribe and lifted the weapon up to her. She lifted it closer so she could get a good look at it. The G was obviously not Lockjaw's and smelled of Saberclaw. She smiled coldly and looked back at Lockjaw. Good. Now I can truly conquer this planet, she exclaimed. All of the other Nextari in the room cheered, making Lockjaw cringe. How was he so loyal to this alien before? It was such a challenge now that he was pretending to be loyal. Ribe looked back at the chubby Nextari scientist. The scientist had a very large head and big, black eyes with gray skin and tentacles coming out of his head, as well as some sort of bony horns. Boltar, go and fix Lockjaw up while I carry out our plan to snuff out the others. The Nextari scientist, named Boltar, led Lockjaw out of Ribea's throne room. The hallways were lit by bright lights built into the ceiling, and each wall was in a hexagon shape. Lockjaw began to panic as he thought to himself, "Plan? What plan?" Meanwhile, Saberclaw, Razorwing, and Silverspot were trekking through the woods. Occasionally, Saberclaw had to brush her hand against a tree branch and steady herself. She was thinking about Ribe and all the horrible things she had done to Earth and other planets. She didn't understand how someone could be so evil. She wouldn't be able to be so cruel to anyone, even if it was towards Ribe herself. However, she had heard from Lila that villains in stories aren't born, but they are made. Thus, she wondered if someone had made Ribe a villain. If anyone knew the answer to that question, it was Silverspot. Saberclaw stepped over a log and addressed Silverspot. "Silver, can I ask you a question?" She wasn't even sure if Silverspot would even know the answer to her question. Silverspot stopped walking and locked eyes with Saberclaw. "Of course. What is it?" Silverspot curiously asked as she fidgeted with the metal covering on her arm. Now, Razorwing had stopped walking with curiosity as well. Saberclaw had never asked to speak before, so this was unusual. Saberclaw asked, "Why is Ribe so evil?" She tilted her head with curiosity. Silverspot looked at her with a disturbed expression, but answered, "The answer to that is very complex, Saberclaw. Ribe didn't exactly just wake up one day and decide to conquer the universe at all cost." She frowned and let her head fall a little. Now, Razorwing was confused and asked, "Well then, why is she trying to conquer the universe?" His eyes hardened at the thought of Ribe taking over planets. Silverspot leaned against a tree. She actually has a fairly tragic childhood that she told Ironstripe and I one day. You see, she and her parents had a bad relationship, and she has trauma starting from a young age. Her parents abused her, and she became bitter, and her fury simply bloomed from there. Saberclaw thought about someone hurting Ribe. Saberclaw only knows Ribe as a powerful war queen, so such circumstances were hard to imagine. Silverspot continued. Then, after years of her parents' neglect, Ribe's planet was invaded by someone whom she didn't tell us about. Her parents were killed, as well as about half of the Nextari population. Ribe was an adult by this time, and she refused to let the remaining Nextari become victims, and she used her tragic backstory to convince the Nextari people to become bitter and want to seek vengeance on the universe for causing so much anguish to the Nextari people. Silverspot used air quotes since, apparently, that was the words Ribe had used. Silverspot lowered her head and said, "So, she has been terrorizing and conquering and doing who knows what else to whatever planets she comes across and their inhabitants." The three of them stood in silence for a moment, until Razorwing broke such silence. "Wow, that sounds heavy," he said with wide eyes. Saberclaw's face showed a determination as she added, "It doesn't matter how terrible her life is. She doesn't have the right to hurt everyone else because of it." especially not attempt or succeed at killing anyone who stands in her way. Saberclaw put her hand over her carefully wrapped chest, gesturing towards it. She continued, "Besides, I have another question. Do you have any idea why she is so scared of me? Before I was caught, I could see how terrified she was when I attacked her and her soldiers. Why me of all people?" she asked with enthusiasm. Silver Spot nodded her head and shrugged. "I am not entirely sure, but she did tell me a few vague things before Ironstripe and I escaped." Saberclaw looked at her, silently asking Silver Spot to continue. Silver Spot took the initiative and spoke. "It doesn't make any sense to me either, but she has been alive for a lot longer than you or I, and she seems to sense something in you that no one else does, and it scares her. She sees something powerful in you that you simply haven't awakened yet. I honestly don't know anything other than that, but I feel we can use it to our advantage." Saberclaw looked down with wide eyes. What could Rebay be seeing in her? Saberclaw looked at her hands. They seemed ordinary, except for the fact that they were metal and very large, of course. Silver Spot walked over to Saberclaw and held her hands tightly, saying, "Don't worry, Saber. When we figure out what it is that scares Rebay, we will help you harness it and defeat her." The two of them locked eyes. Saberclaw knew that if the Queen of the Nextari was afraid that some unknown thing about Saber could hurt her, then that unknown reason could hurt the Sentiron as well. That is what made Saberclaw uneasy. "Well, maybe that should be at the top of our priority list." Razorwing spoke lightly, like this matter was some jigsaw puzzle and not something that could be a dangerous characteristic of Saberclaw's. Silver Spot nodded in agreement and began continuing the group's walk to the base. "Yes, that should be our top priority because it could be a sure way to defeat Rebay. Maybe Lockjaw will be able to pick up some information about that." They exited the forest and walked onto the field behind the base. As they walked through the field, Lockjaw came back to Saberclaw's mind. If all went well, then Lockjaw was probably getting repairs on Rebay's warship. If it didn't, then he could be dead or worse. The thought of this made Saberclaw terrified. She shook her head, convincing herself to not think about the negatives. After all, his weapon had her literal spilled G on it, and he had a broken wing. Their plan should be foolproof. They walked into the base where Sam was talking with Ironstripe, and John was trying to comfort the nervous Lila. When the teenager noticed Saberclaw walk in unharmed, she ran over and greeted Saberclaw warmly. Saber kneeled and let Lila hug her finger. This gesture had become something like a tradition between the two of them, because Lila couldn't physically hug Saberclaw properly due to size differences. Saberclaw thought of this and decided that this time she would get a proper hug out of Lila. Saberclaw turned back into her human form, and Lila grinned from ear to ear when she realized the reason for her friend's actions. Lila hugged Alea tightly, as if they hadn't seen each other in a very long time. Lila looked into Alea's bright green eyes and said, "I heard that you all got ambushed by Lockjaw, but all my memories that I just found out I'd lost due to brain injury came back, and please tell me he didn't hurt you and you didn't kill him." She was talking almost too fast for Alea to understand. She figured Lila and her father had some sort of amnesia as well, and had also remembered past events. Alea shook her head and responded, "No, Lockjaw, and I got our memories back as well, and he is on our side now. He is currently spying on the Nextari right now. Oh, and fun fact, we found a way to convince Rebay that I am dead." She laughed at the thought. If all went well, he is currently gaslighting Rebay right now. She chose not to list the other outcome for Lila's sake. Then, Alea turned back into Saberclaw and watched Ironstripe's face light up. He rushed over to her and hugged her tightly, letting his head fall into her shoulder as he held her. She struggled under his force, but hugged him back. She knew why he was so happy to see her. As far as he knew, she could have been killed by Lockjaw. He didn't let go of her as she chuckled awkwardly. "I'm okay, Ironstripe. There is no need to grab me so tightly. Remember that I'm still broken." She managed to pry him off of her. Silver Spot was pleased to see him so happy that she was unharmed, but she couldn't help but feel embarrassed at how he had shown his affection in front of the young robots and the humans. Razorwing rolled his eyes and looked back at Saberclaw, who seemed like she was in her own world, talking to Lila. He moved closer to her and interrupted the conversation between Saberclaw and Lila Saber, can I talk to you in private for a minute? He seemed serious, so Saberclaw apologized to Lila and told her that she would be back soon. She followed him into the field behind the base. This better be good. Razorwing, Saberclaw said as she put her hands on her hips. Razorwing's wings fell to his side, expressing his struggle to speak to Saberclaw. He, knowing she probably wouldn't have a good reaction to what he was about to say, braced himself as he answered, Look, Saberclaw, I have to talk to you about Lockjaw. Saberclaw was severely unimpressed, knowing where this was going, and decided to not listen to him at all. She waved him off and began to walk away, but she felt his hand grip hers possessively. She gasped at this gesture which she had deemed an unspoken thing that only Lockjaw was allowed to do. She turned quickly and glared at him until she fully registered his facial expression. He looked desperate in a way that seemed impossible for his arrogant personality. Her annoyed face fell as he tried to keep her attention. He spoke loudly and desperately. I know you have a thing for Lockjaw, but I feel like that is clouding your judgment. Think. All he had to do to gain your trust was say he recognized you and feed into your feelings. He literally tried to kill you. He could easily be emotionally manipulating you and just be giving Rebay an immeasurable amount of information right now. Just listen to me and think for a minute. He seemed so genuine as his tone softened. His desperate tone made Saberclaw hear him out. He was right. Lockjaw could be lying, but she hated the thought of him doing such a thing. She argued back. If he was lying to me, then why would he not kill me? He's had many chances to kill me, but instead saved my life for crying out loud. He has betrayed Rebay at least 3 times by now, and why would someone completely loyal to Rebay and still under her control do that? They both had raised their voices. Now, the others had heard the commotion and come out of the base to watch the argument. Razorwing noticed them, but didn't care. He only wanted Saberclaw to see what he saw when he looked at Lockjaw. He shouted angrily, Saberclaw, you have been blinded by his facade. He isn't good for you. If he could betray Rebay so easily, then he will probably betray you just as easily, he reasoned. She shook her head and sighed heavily as she shouted in response. Yeah, he betrayed her because he couldn't stand to see her hurt me. Not because he could. The reason you are so dead set on keeping him away from me is because you can't stand him being so close to me and not you. Her face fell when she saw his reaction to her harsh words. He stepped back. He felt like her words had cut through him. The worst part was that they were true. Saberclaw turned her head away quickly and tried to walk away, but Razorwing wasn't done talking to her. He reached for her again, but this time he missed and pulled the metal covering off of Saberclaw's chest, revealing the large scar running down her chest. She gasped as she saw it for the first time. It was completely repaired, but the scar was still very prominent, and she now saw the true damage her own dagger had done to her. Razorwing, realizing his mistake, quickly tried to apologize, but she turned around to face him. She had heard shouting from behind her, but refused to listen to her comrades. Razorwing had also turned to the side and was looking at something with a terrified face. Seeing his expression, she turned to see what he was looking at. Then, she finally listened to the shouting and realized it was Silver Spot yelling, "Look out!" Gas! Saberclaw saw the purple gas looming out from the woods and creeping around her feet. She had no idea what it was, but Silver Spot was screaming warnings until she stopped. Silver Spot completely collapsed when the gas reached her, and the humans and Ironstripe were already on the ground, unconscious. She looked over at Razorwing, but saw him struggling to stand up straight as the gas was now rising like a fog around them. Soon, Saberclaw could not see Silver Spot or the humans or Ironstripe. The purple gas was too thick. She turned in time to see Razorwing fully collapse and hit the ground hard. She fell to her knees and tried to wake him up by yelling his name. However, she could feel her own control over her body slipping. She whirled around, looking for something, anything that could help her, but she couldn't see anything in the gas. The robots didn't breathe, so she had no idea how the gas was getting in their bodies. Then, she realized that their armor wasn't airtight, so that was probably how they were taking in the gas. The purple smoke was obviously some sort of poison, but Saberclaw couldn't even see the sky and had no sense of direction now, so flying out wasn't an option. Then, she saw the glow of Lockjaw's blue eyes and saw him grab her. Her vision was fading, so she could barely see his body as he lifted her up into his arms. He stretched his large wings and struggled through his broken wing, but painfully managed to get the two of them far enough away from the gas that somehow stayed within the base. He gently laid Saberclaw on the ground and began talking to her firmly. "Look at me. Focus on something and you should get your vision back. You didn't take in enough gas, so you should be fine. Just focus on me, darling." She sat up and her vision cleared. Her first thought wasn't on what the gas was, but that she needed to get her friends out of it. She stood up shakily and tried to run back into the gas, but Lockjaw grabbed her by the waist. She turned and yelled desperately as she fought his grasp. "No, they're still in there. I need to get them out." By now, the gas had completely consumed the base, and Saberclaw could no longer see through it at all. She fought, but Lockjaw kept her close and said calmly, "Saberclaw, the gas won't hurt them. Don't worry. If you go back in, the gas will knock you out too, and Rebay will catch you." He let her go, and she looked at the purple gas. Her lip quivered as she argued. "I can't just let that monster take my team. You saw what she did to me. What do you think she'll do to them?" She looked around. She waited to see Rebay pop out from somewhere, but it was just her and Lockjaw. Lockjaw's blue eyes sparkled as he stood beside Saberclaw and said, "Saber, Rebay will be here any minute to collect your friends. You need to get out of here and hide. Seriously, you need to go." His voice wasn't desperate, but he was definitely rushing her. She turned to look at him again and saw the obviously alien brace holding his wing in place. She huffed and ran off to hide behind a large tree. She wrapped her wings around herself and crouched. Since she had green paint, she blended in very well with the greenery and was very hard to see. Moments later, she saw Rebay and many soldiers walk out from the forest to stand beside Lockjaw. Rebay, without looking at Lockjaw, asked, "Why did you go ahead?" "Never mind that. Are they all unconscious?" She squinted, but couldn't see through the smog. Lockjaw looked at Rebay. "Yes. This obviously isn't their base, but I guess we got lucky that they are still here." He was lying to her to protect the Sentiron base. However, he could have just as easily lied by saying the Sentiron weren't there. After all, it isn't like Rebay could see them herself due to the gas. Rebay turned and ordered the soldiers beside her to fetch the Sentiron warriors' bodies in the Nextari language. The soldiers walked into the gas with caution. About 30 minutes later, Saberclaw watched the soldiers walk out, dragging her teammates behind them. Saberclaw had to cover her mouth to keep from shouting when she saw their state. Even the humans were caught and looked like all of the life had been sucked out of them. Surprisingly, they had even caught Ironstripe. With his large body, Saberclaw had been sure he would get out in time before the gas completely knocked him out. Saberclaw still was hiding when she saw Rebay drop something into Ironstripe's mouth, causing him to jolt back to reality. He stood up quickly and asked, "What happened? What's going on?" He was confused. Rebay rolled her eyes and explained, "Nothing much, just Bolter's new gas mixture taking out the pests." She walked over to Razorwing and grabbed him by the armor that wrapped around and protected his neck. She lifted his unconscious body up with impossible strength. Seeing this made Saberclaw confused by Rebay's abilities. Rebay sneered at Razorwing. "This is the red ripoff you told me about?" she asked. Saberclaw was confused at her words. She seemed to be talking to the air because she wasn't making eye contact with anyone, and neither Ironstripe or Lockjaw should have been able to tell Rebay anything about Razorwing. Now that she thought of it, Saberclaw was confused on why Ironstripe wasn't trying to attack Rebay. Rebay had her back turned to him, but he was just standing there. Saberclaw thought to herself, "Attack her, Ironstripe. It's an easy target." He stood there and answered, "Yes, he is the one that seems to show some sort of favoritism towards Saberclaw and is oddly protective of her." Saberclaw's eyes went wide. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her audio receptors must have been faulty. Rebay laughed out loud and said, "No, he had a crush on her. He can't love her anymore thanks to you, Lockjaw." She laughed as Lockjaw put his head down. Saberclaw was completely shocked. There was only one explanation for why Ironstripe wasn't attacking Rebay and why, apparently, he had the chance to tell Rebay about Razorwing. That reason was that he was working for her in some way. He was a traitor to the Sentiron. This caught Saberclaw so off guard that she began contemplating if Silverspot was as well. However, Saberclaw thought better of it since Silverspot was so loyal to the Sentiron. Now that Saberclaw looked at her memories in a different light, she noticed that Rebay never directly hurt Ironstripe, even when they were captured a few days ago. Also, he would randomly leave the base for unknown reasons. Saberclaw's anger had been kindled. It took every ounce of self-control that she had in her body to not jump out of hiding and attack Ironstripe. She sat, hidden in the forest, as she watched everything unfold. Rebay dropped Razorwing, and he hit the ground with a loud clanking sound. Saberclaw was furious, but controlled her actions. Then, Saberclaw moved her wings slightly to get a better look at the events, and it revealed the glow of her optics. Rebay noticed the glow out of the corner of her eyes and turned. She pretended not to notice, but grabbed one of Razorwing's shuriken. Saberclaw's hiding spot was in the woods up on a slow-sloping hill. Rebay, with the precision of a well-trained sniper, threw the shuriken star at the bright green glow. Saberclaw noticed the star flying at her and moved her wing in front of her face. The shuriken slashed a large hole in Saberclaw's wing, and pain ripped through Saberclaw. She lost balance from shock. She fell down the hill and landed near Rebay and her comrades. Saberclaw groaned and placed her arm under her, bracing herself where she could see Rebay. The alien queen walked angrily up to Saberclaw and grabbed her by the shoulder, lifting Saberclaw up to her knees. Saberclaw's wing began leaking G and caused pain when it moved. Rebay snarled, "Why is this thing still alive?" She turned to Lockjaw with a scary and angry face while still holding Saberclaw. Lockjaw took a step back, knowing that he was caught. I know I killed her. I have no idea how she is still alive." Rebay, luckily, accepted this complete lie of an excuse and turned back to face Saberclaw as the Sentiron struggled against her grip. Saberclaw gritted her teeth to Rebay and tried her best to escape, but Rebay was insanely strong. Rebay sighed and mockingly tilted her head as she spoke. "Well then, 3 attempts and you still refuse to die. I may have to take you apart this time to make sure you're dead." She threw Saberclaw to the ground and slammed her foot on Saberclaw's arm with incredible force. Pain shot through Saberclaw's arm as she saw it break under the force. Saberclaw cried out and Lockjaw lunged forward a little, reaching out to Saberclaw. Rebay snapped her head towards him and barked, "Step back, soldier!" He stepped back with hesitation. He wasn't sure which was better for Saberclaw: keep up his act and help her later, or attack now and risk both of their deaths. Now, Silverspot was beginning to come back to her senses. She opened her eyes and gained consciousness. She looked up from her spot on the ground and saw Saberclaw writhing in pain on the ground. Rebay smiled cruelly and forced Saberclaw's dagger out of her hand, squeezing Saberclaw's hand until she let go of the dagger. Rebay used the dagger and slashed Saberclaw's leg. G poured out of the wound, and Saberclaw screamed from the combined pain of her wing, her arm, and her leg. Lockjaw couldn't watch this anymore and begged Rebay, "Your Highness, please stop. Leave her alone. I beg you." Rebay ignored him and held Saberclaw up by her neck. Saberclaw used her one good arm to attempt to release herself from Rebay's hold. Rebay held the dagger up to Saberclaw's neck. She put pressure, but not enough to cut Saberclaw. By now, Razorwing had come back to his senses as well. Rebay turned to Lockjaw and sighed heavily. "Fine. I was just having some fun. However, you're right. I should keep her alive so I can play with her later." "That is a great idea, Lockjaw." Rebay smiled as Lockjaw silently became relieved. The War Queen dropped Saberclaw, and the robot groaned and writhed on the ground from agony. The humans were still unconscious, but Silverspot saw Saberclaw on the ground and the G-covered blade in Rebay's 6-fingered hands. She struggled, but she stood up and managed to sneak up on Rebay. She punched Rebay in the back of the head and called out to Ironstripe. "Ironstripe, Rebay is right here." Rebay clutched the back of her head and then brought it back in front of her face. It was covered in purple blood. Soldiers grabbed Silverspit and dragged her away from Rebay. Ironstripe lowered his head, ignoring Silverspot's request. Saberclaw managed to speak through the pain. "Ironstripe, please don't do this." Ironstripe didn't answer as he watched G pull from Saberclaw's body. Lockjaw, unable to watch Saberclaw suffer, crouched down and put his hand on Saberclaw's face and said, "It's okay, Saberclaw. You're going to be okay." Rebay saw this and grabbed the back of Lockjaw's neck. She dragged him off of her as he struggled. He fought out of her grasp and stood up, threatening her. Rebay hissed, "Stop sympathizing for her. She is a criminal who is getting what she deserves." Rebay got a good look at Lockjaw and realized that he no longer had the purple glint in his eyes that meant he didn't have his memories. She raised a tentacle-covered eyebrow and spoke. "Ah, that is why you have been acting so strange. Well, I can fix that." She ran behind him with incredible speed and kicked him down. She ordered her soldiers to hold him still in the Nextari language. They obeyed and kept him on his knees. He retaliated and shouted for the soldiers to let him go. Saberclaw was forced to watch as Rebay placed her hand on Lockjaw's head. He twitched as his eyes regained the purple streaks. He felt his hands and knees when she lifted her hand off of him. He stood up and then quickly kneeled before her, saying, "I am sorry for my traitorous action, my queen. If you could ever forgive me and allow me to fight for you once again." He recited his apology like someone else entirely was saying it. Saberclaw yelled his name as Rebay put her hand on his shoulder. "I do forgive you. Now rejoin my forces as my loyal servant," she said and smirked. Lockjaw thanked Rebay and walked over to Saberclaw. "Well, hello again, Saberclaw. I still don't understand why you haven't been executed. However, I will say, you look terrible." He walked away and stood by Rebay. Saberclaw let her head fall into the dirt as she clutched her leg. Blue-green liquid seeped through her fingers as she struggled. Razorwing tried to stand and defend Saberclaw, but at least 5 soldiers struggled to hold him back. Saberclaw felt helpless as she tried to ignore the pain and defend herself. She couldn't even stand or retaliate. Ironstripe was still standing to the side as Silverspot screamed at him, asking him why he would betray her so easily. He yelled back loud enough for everyone to hear, "I did it to save you. Rebay promised that she would let you, and I go free unharmed if I helped her conquer Earth." This silenced Silverspot and stunned Razorwing. Silverspot was thinking about why Rebay would need Ironstripe for a spy when she thought of the reason. Saberclaw had some sort of power that Rebay was scared of, and the Sentiron needed that power now more than ever.